Hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury. In this current iteration of the show, we are working on a collection called We'll Always Have Paris, featuring 22 short stories from the great Ray Bradbury. We are up to story number 4 of 22, which is The Murder. The way that these reviews work is that I do a brief synopsis of what happens in the story, and then I sort of wrap up with a very brief analysis of what it all means to me, what I got out of it. And I mainly do this for my own entertainment, but if you enjoy these as well, cool. I did do some research since last week, and I did find out that all of these stories in this collection were first published in this collection. That doesn't mean that some of them weren't written in the past. Bradbury was notorious for pulling old stories, non-published stories from his archives and putting them in later books. And I have a theory that, feeling that many of these stories are in fact much older than 2009, but take that for what you will. All right, so as for that synopsis, the murderer, Mr. Bentley, says that some people, such as him, are incapable of murder. Mr. Hill believes that everyone is capable of murder, and then they make a brief wager, small wager, $1 against 2 dimes, that he can push Mr. Bentley to murder in the space of 1 month. The story then backtracks. We learn that Bentley and Hill are essentially strangers. Hill has moved into his house as a boarder for the last 3 months, and in all that time, they've never had any sort of disagreement at all. They seem like the two people who could have grown up together and are very much very, very similar people. Immediately, though, after placing the bet, things begin to change. Hill calls Bentley a fat ass. Bentley sees Hill with his shirt off, looking at himself in the mirror, pinching and prodding himself, being amazed at how beautiful he looks. And though at that moment, Bentley realizes that the man is covered in knife wounds and bullet scars, and he reveals, yes, I've placed this bet many times before. Soon after, feeling a little bit unnerved, Bentley asks Hill to move out. Hill refuses. Bentley even lies and says, I need this room immediately. My mother-in-law has to move in. Hill then begins to complain about, what's for breakfast in the morning. And he says probably ham and eggs again. Very, very petty things. Not the type of things that should drive a person to murder. But Bentley then, getting more and more frantic and scared, insist that they call the bet off. Hill refuses, and then sort of it cuts. Some unspecified time later, Bentley finds himself standing over Hill's dead body with a gun in his hand. He places 2 dimes in the man's eye sockets, his lifeless eye sockets, as he waits for the police to arrive. Sorry if I didn't do that whole description justice. I read a lot of notes, but then I managed to miss them as I'm doing this. So there's a lot going on here in just a few pages. Hill wants to die. That is my theory. Hill wants to die, but he doesn't have it in himself to do it on his own. Therefore, he needs to prod and push somebody to do it for him. It seems like he's tried this numerous times. So for all his bet and bluster about, everybody having it in them to kill, to murder, I don't think he has it in himself to do it to himself. The bet was that everyone was capable of murder, and Bentley doesn't believe that he has it in him. In reverse of Hill, we find that Bentley is very, very easily pushed to murder. And that got me wondering, did Bentley make this bet because he in fact had a fear, an internal rage, a knowledge that perhaps he could be pushed to murder more easily than he was willing to admit, and he needed to make this bet against this man to prove to himself that, yes, I have self-control, you can't drive me to murder. But in the end, he was driven to murder over a few silly comments about his weight, about breakfast, about 1 or 2 other things mentioned in the story. I'm inclined, partially at least, to say that this isn't a great story. It's always, Bradbury's always good. He's dependably, his prose is so at ease with itself that it's hard to dislike anything he writes, but sometimes he does these stories and they don't quite pull off what they're trying to pull off. And I felt like that may be going on here for just a few moments. And as I was writing my notes, that switch that switch began to flip. And I decided that this was purely intentional, this idea that that Bentley was easily pushed to murder. Bradbury could have spent several more pages showing elaborate button pushing by Hill trying to drive this man over the edge, but in fact, he didn't have to try very hard. And one of the telling things about the story is how they describe, or Bradbury describes that, when he moved in for 3 months, they hadn't had a single argument. And Bentley made it sound as if, we could have been friends all of our entire life. So these two people are very, very much alike. And I think that's sort of the key here. This idea that, a lot of people can be pushed over the edge very, very quickly, more quickly than they're willing to admit. And there's not a huge difference necessarily between the murderer and the victim in this situation. The idea that everyone is closer to the edge than you might think. And I think Bradbury, that's what Bradbury's probably saying here. This idea that, we like to think that, as fine, upstanding citizens, we're nothing like people who have committed horrible acts. But deep down inside, I think we know that there isn't a huge difference. It's one bad decision, one bad night, one bad instance when the perfect combination of triggers causes you to do something and changes your entire life forever and ends somebody else's entire life forever. So I think I think this story is a lot more successful than I was initially willing to give it credit for. But even as I've sat here discussing it, I've come around on it just in a few short moments to realize that this is actually quite good and says a lot more than you would think. So it's definitely a story that I'm going to be thinking about for a while after this video, and I think that you will too if you give it a shot. So there you have it, their murder. Not to be confused with, there's another story Bradbury wrote called The Murderer. But this one was from 2009's We'll Always Have Paris. Next up, we'll be looking at a story called When the Bough Breaks. So be sure to tune in next week to find out what that is all about. And I'll see you again soon. Don't kill anyone. See you later.